of Stars and Memphis and the Rockefeller Project.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about the Rockefeller Project?
The Rockefeller Project is now called True Crime, and it's a play that I've written over the last 3.5 years, and it is a true crime story about a real guy whose real name is Christian Karl Gerhardsweider, and he is in prison right now for murder and other things. And I found out about him. I was watching TV like 20 years ago. I was obsessed with this show, Unsolved Mysteries. You remember that show?
Sure
With Robert
do.
Stack? I loved that show. And he at that time was wanted they did a feature on him because he was wanted in questioning for the disappearance of 2 people in California. But at that time, his name was Christopher Chichester. And then cut to 15 years later, and I was watching the news one day, and there was this big fuss being made because a Rockefeller had, in a messy divorce, kidnapped his child. And there was an Amber Alert out, and because he was a Rockefeller, all the news networks covered it. And they showed his face, and I was like, oh my God, that's that guy.
Yeah.
And I started getting really fascinated with him, and he had been impersonating a Rockefeller for 14 years and risen to unbelievable heights, was married to a woman who was making $3 million a year and lived in a mansion on Beacon Hill and had everybody completely believing.
Yeah, wasn't he the president of one of those societies?
Yeah, he was like the president of lots of fancy clubs in Boston, and he was a German who had learned how to speak English by impersonating Thurston Howell III on Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
And he's just a fascinating, very sad and very dark character. But what he was trying to be was in some way me. My family come from Boston and are kind of old Boston family, and I recognized that he looked like me and that we sort of had the same style sense. And I thought, gee, what would it be like if this guy who was sort of trying to pretend to be someone like me, what if I tried to pretend to be someone like him? And I became interested in this mirror.
And now you're learning lots of weird stuff about
and
yourself.
Now for sure. Yeah, I mean, so then the play, I got Chris Abraham involved, who runs a theater company called Crow's Theater in Toronto, and he's a brilliant guy, and he got involved, and he started to say, well, this guy's interesting, but why are you interested in this guy?
Yeah.
And so then the play became much more about what it is about me that makes me so obsessed with crime.
Yeah.
And with these strange characters that live on the peripheries of our world and do things that the rest of us might have contemplated doing but would never dream of actually doing.
It seems to me like he might not have crossed that line into murderer or kidnapper had it not serviced his long con.
Absolutely.
Like, I don't think he was out to be a killer, but it was just...
Agreed.
He was ardent about his con.
Agreed.
So,
It was, I think, necessity.
Right.
To keep the lie going and to keep his sense of... To keep the lie going, he would do anything.
Yeah.
Because ultimately he was someone so terrified of being himself that he would do anything to prevent people from discovering that real self. And,
Right.
I think there's parallels in Donald Trump, I think that, or Jian Ghomeshi, I think that people who live a lie, the longer you live that lie, the more you have to protect it, and the more you're willing to sacrifice to protect it. And, that's the poison of the lie, right? It's like once you hold on to it, you got to build up all this shit around it to keep it solid.
Well, one thing that I kind of question about Jian Ghomeshi, clearly he's guilty of being an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
But
No doubt about that.
But when you,
in my opinion,
when you look at these kind of victim statements, if you're into rough sex, you can find that community.
Mm-hmm.
I think did his ego just get in his way and he thought he could go from 0 to 60 with a new date? Go, oh, by the way, I'm going to punch you in the face now, and that's just normal.
It's a mystery to me because he, as I say, that lie or that part of his life was so anathema to who he was publicly. What I can say about Jian is every single person that I saw him interact with, and in my interactions with him personally, there were two modes.
Right.
There was seduce and dominate. And that's really the only two ways he knew how to communicate with people.
Sure.
And it was difficult to be around him for that reason.
You never know which one you're going to get. Or...
Yeah, and it just never was normal. Yeah. There was always he was always trying to put you in a position that would strengthen his own.
Right.
And every conversation, every interaction was a guilt trip or a manipulation or a compliment paid in order to get you to do something for him.
Right.
And he is an exhausting person to be around. And I appreciate his belief in me. I have to admit that, he showed a lot of faith in me by getting me on the radio and letting me talk.
Yeah.
He's a very smart guy. I think he was brilliant at his job. And I think, like everyone, he's not one thing or the other.
Right.
He's not a total demon and he's not a total angel.
Love you. And I have to say that because then people say, well, do you guys actually hate each other?
And I always reply, yes.
But he's definitely someone who, in my opinion, didn't know himself at all. And was doing anything he could to protect the self he wanted to be.
Right. And that's a direct parallel to Rockefeller.
Yeah. Yeah. Or to anyone who's got a secret, right?
Yeah.
That they're trying to keep. It gets exhausting to keep those secrets.
Well, I think that's interesting that you probe it, because Maya Angelou would like to say, she'd quote Terence, nothing human can be alien to me. So on the spectrum of human behavior, okay, well,
yeah,
you can't always be a monster. I mean, you've got parents, you care about your parents,
And love is not in my opinion, love is not the domain or the exclusive domain of the good.
Yeah.
Hitler was in love with Eva Braun.
Yes, he was.
And
and dogs.
Yeah, it's possible to be in love and be a really terrible human being.
Right.
And I think we all kind of want to feel like love is this holy thing. And I think love is a holy thing, and it's also a profane thing. And it can make you do beautiful things, selfless things. It can also make you do terrible, selfish things.
Yeah.
And a lot of what Stars has written about over the years, and a lot of what we've examined, is that notion, is that that love does not discriminate between. It's blind.
Right.
It comes into everybody's life, and no one has more of a right to it than anyone else.
Well, this might be a bad segue, but somewhat related. You've had a pretty public Twitter war, I guess, with the former administration in Canada.
Yes.
And
it was a one-way war. They never replied to me.
And it's interesting to me, one, that Twitter's kind of the battlefield now, especially with what's going on with the alt-right provocateur Milo and things like that. And I think I even found an old article where you were like, I quit Twitter. But I mean, I'm following you on Twitter now. So,
yeah,
so
I hate Twitter.
That didn't take.
I really hate it. I really do.
But what do you think of the new administration?
I mean, listen. I think they're just exactly what Canada wants, and has always wanted. Canada, the Liberal Party is the natural governing party of Canada because they don't do anything.
Right.
And ultimately, that's what Canadians would like you to do, is nothing, And I think Justin Trudeau will probably be Prime Minister for 15 years. And, is he a sociopathic ideologue who hates people? No.
Right.
So that's an improvement. Is he someone that I think has the courage of his convictions? No, I don't think he does have the courage of his convictions. I think he has a lot of good ideas and a lot of good sentiments, but I don't think he's someone who's willing to, as far as I can see, make the difficult decisions that will put him in trouble with the corporate power structure and the political power structure and all those people you'd have to piss off in order to actually create change, right?
Well, maybe this is just personal taste, but Harper wasn't hiding what he was like. He was
Right.
he was kind of a religious zealot.
He was genuinely Stephen Harper.
He was genuinely himself.
Yeah.
Where Trudeau, it seems, I mean, just the amount of hypocrisy even lately from when he's gone to China and he talks about human rights violations. They say, well, you haven't been any better. And he's right. We have a lot to talk about as a nation about,
For sure.
the way we've treated our indigenous population.
Absolutely.
But to kind of compare, that's apples and oranges.
And to
Politically,
call yourself a feminist and then sell weapons to Saudi Arabia, it's like that's
It's
pretty
absurd.
problematic.
It's completely
it's pretty
absurd.
problematic. And there's always this thing of like, hey, you got to be pragmatic. What can you do? Well, I don't buy that, and that's my problem ultimately with most politicians and with politics in general is that they campaign on ideals and they govern on compromises.
right.
And, people say, well, that's just the way politics is. Well, just because that's the way it is doesn't mean it shouldn't change.
Right.
And I think that, you see in the last year and a half, Barack Obama has been the president that I wished he'd been for the last 8 years. Because he has nothing to lose anymore, he's now governing on the power of his principles.
That's right.
And he's doing some extraordinary things. And prior to that, he was governing like a politician and really was a bit of a failure and didn't get a lot of things done that he should have gotten done. I think he's a smart enough guy. He'll look back and say to himself, I should have just should have been myself earlier.
Yeah.
And accepted that I wasn't always going to please everybody and that some people were going to hate what I did and that, I got a mandate and I should have carried through with it, But politicians, they tend to be people who are very concerned with people liking them. But just even in their personality, like I think it seems to me Justin Trudeau is a guy who really loves everybody loving him.
Yeah.
And it's really important to him that everybody think he's a really good guy, and that's kind of dishonest because none of us are all that good.
It's definitely dishonest. Like even today he did that same caveat when he was commenting on Trump's ridiculous.
Right.
As a feminist,
Yeah.
can you keep saying that with the
Yeah.
$15 billion arms deal with...
And then that sentence
Saudi
ended
Arabia.
with, I have no comment.
Yeah.
It's like, so you've just burnished your own rep, but you don't have the courage to say this man's a disgusting pig, and
Yeah.
I don't care if he's the President of the United States, I'll say so to his face.
Right.
That's what I would like to hear my leader say.
Yeah.
But he's a guy who's, you can't do that. I have a Justin Trudeau story, actually. I DJ'd a party, a benefit for an organization that helps people in the third world do investigative journalism. So like funds and aids journalists in third world countries.
Right. It's a dangerous job.
It is. And so I was there, and Justin Trudeau was there. And this was like 6 months before the election or 5 months before the election. And I saw him standing there, and I was drunk because I was DJing. So I saw him standing there. He's super handsome. He's even more handsome in person. And I go up to him, and I look in his eyes, and I go, beat this man. Beat this man. Now, there's a bunch of reactions you can have to a drunk guy yelling
Sure.
at you at a party. You can say, get the fuck away from me, or you can say, I will, or you can say, thanks, cheers, This is what he did. And I was like, oh, man,
That's
that's a disappointing reaction to someone asking you to beat Stephen Harper. And what it indicated to me was like, hey, we're all part of the same club. Don't be beating up on Stephen.
Yeah.
It was very unnerving.
Well, when your tweets went out on the day of the attack in Ottawa, and then when I saw Trudeau talk about the bill, he didn't oppose it. He just said, "No, we'll just." It's as if they'll look over their shoulder and make sure they don't sneak anything too nefarious in there. But he's never really opposed anything that they've done.
No, and it still exists. There it sits.
It's
still being used.
It's right on the table. So, would you prefer somebody just? I mean, I think I would prefer Harper being Harper than a hypocrite. Maybe that's just personal taste.
I wouldn't, because it's parliamentary. It's a parliamentary system, and I think there are actually some really good people in the Liberal cabinet, and by hook or by crook over the years, things, they will fund the arts more. They will, I think, to some degree try and deal with the problems of treaties and negotiations with First Nations. I mean, I think those things, they've put a carbon tax in. There's things that on the ground are just going to get done by a Liberal government that the Conservatives would never have done.
We are teaching about residential schools now,
Yeah,
which is great.
there was
Like,
there was a committee on missing and murdered Indigenous women, and there so you have to give them credit on that level. It's just that they ran on a campaign left of the NDP, and then are now governing only slightly to the left of Stephen Harper, and that's the Liberal shtick, right?
Yeah.
They've always done that, and they always will because it works.
It seems like what's good for PR, like the refugee situation. It's worth thinking about. But I'm glad that we seem to have a policy of somewhat open arms, but there needs to be some sort of vetting. And then recently they looked and they said, oh, well, we didn't realize how many children were in these families. So now they're trying to adjust. So it seems that was a really good PR move, and it makes sense to show Canadian generosity and Canadian open arms, I suppose. Like, I don't really see a problem with that policy theoretically. Mm-hmm. But it seems that they knew that. Like, it was more of a public statement to the world, rather than them actually, okay, how are we gonna work this out properly? Like it's and almost the same thing with the marijuana legislation. Like it seems like it's really virtue signaling to steal that.
Well, and they instead of just saying marijuana is a relatively benign substance and people enjoy using it, and we're going to legalize it because it's hypocritical to make it illegal when 40% of the country smoke it, they say we're legalizing it to protect children from the dangers of marijuana. It's like, don't be, just, that's annoying.
That was the same thing Harper said about we're protecting children from predatory drug dealers.
Exactly.
There's no 40-year-old sitting at a school trying to hook these kids with weed.
Yeah, they don't need a 40-year-old. They got a 12-year-old who can sell them some weed.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah.
So yeah, it seems like I don't know. I guess maybe I'm just a little. I'm glad Harper's out now. I'm just annoyed with the hypocrisy. I
am annoyed. I wouldn't say I'm disgusted and in a rage spiral like I was with the Harper government, but I would like it if Justin would get to work, stop taking photos with people.
Yeah. Yeah, he is handsome.
He's incredibly handsome.
He's a snowboard instructor.
He's a bro. He is a McGill bro.
That's right. That's right. He likes to bro down.
He's a serious McGill bro. I think that's the other thing, too, is like just generationally, like we know that guy, right?
Yeah.
We went to high school with that guy. And it's like he was class president and everybody thought he was awesome. It's like, I've seen him be a bit of a dick every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're here recording a new Stars record.
Yeah.
And we were chatting earlier, you had just done a Memphis record.
Yeah.
That was funded by an Indiegogo campaign.
Yeah.
So that was successful. You reached your goal.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to like it. I think that's a good democracy. People get to vote with their dollars if they want to support your
And
product.
it's basically like they're spending their money before they buy the record, right? Like anybody who gave us $10 gets a CD or a digital download. So they're really just buying it in advance and allowing us to make the product that they're eventually going to own.
Right.
Which to me seems like a really good model,
I like that model. What happens, where did the pressing go on the distribution? That's still handled by labels?
No, I mean, we don't know yet. We haven't finished the record. So once it's finished, there's options. We can either create our own company and put it up online digitally, or we could go to a label and see if they would handle it. I'm not quite sure what I want to do with it right now. Part of me wants to go to a label because there's so much administrative work and so much hassle involved in doing it yourself.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it would be cool to follow through on the independent spirit of it and to try and really, complete the task on our own. And I have great friends, who do PR and who do other things who want to step up and help out and are working for way below their pay grade.
Yeah.
And it's fun to do that stuff with your friends. It's fun to make art with your friends and to feel like you've created something completely from scratch, with people that you love. I think that's a good way to spend your time.
Yeah. Well, we touched on it before we were rolling. So, Stars, you guys have, in the past, you kind of took advantage of the Factor grants.
Yeah.
Do you guys still do that?
Well, no, they no longer fund us. Okay. Our gravy train pulled out of the station. So, we had years of Factor support, and we could not have a career without it. Right. I mean, there was a lot of tours and a lot of times when Factor made it possible for us to get on the road at a loss and go play that room again and create an audience in places. And, I think Factor as an idea is super important in Canada because there's this huge country with vast spaces between it.
Yeah.
And bands, it's really hard to make a drive across Canada pay the bills, If you're only getting 50 people a night or something, you need that subsidization. And that's what Factor gave us. So, at this point, we can do that on our own, and so they don't fund us, which is fair enough.
So is that the fundamental difference? I mean, with the success of like Superchunk and their label, or I think it's Sid at Les Savvy Fav and French Kiss Records, like they grew their indie scene. Was it purely because of the short drives, the number of population?
Well, yeah, I think that's a big part of it. There's 10 times more people in the United States, and Superchunk and Savvy Fav, those guys got into music when people were still buying records.
That's right.
So you could show up at a show and you could set up your merch table, and even though your guarantee might only be $200, you made another $500 on your merch. Yeah. Now, nobody buys records. Merch used to be a huge part of what made it work for a band. Now, people don't buy records, so...
Well, they still buy
They buy vinyl. They buy vinyl and they buy
vinyl.
T-shirts, but they don't, like you used to just get rid of a box of CDs on a night, you know? And that doesn't happen anymore. So it's just, we released our first album in 2000. That was the year that the most records were sold in the history of music. And our career has been like the descent of the music industry has like paralleled our career. And now like the free fall has happened. And you really just have to look at an album as a promotional tool to promote your shows. And if it happens to sell some copies, then that's a bonus. Yeah. But streaming and all these things has just completely destroyed the recording aspect of the music industry.
Right. And that's where Indiegogo comes in. Mm-hmm. You have a more direct, like a fan, they kind of know what they're going to get from you. They've got a nice back catalog, so if that's what, they feel safe investing their capital into your artistic endeavors.
The way I look at my music career now is like I have a shop, It's a little shop, it's a corner store. We sell certain things. We don't sell everything, but we make good stuff. And if you like our stuff, you can always come to our store and we'll sell it to you at a reasonable price, and we promise we won't let you down. It's like any local business. And I don't worry about all the people who don't like Stars or don't like Memphis or have never heard of us anymore. Yeah. I worry about the people who do. And as long as I can continue a relationship of trust with those people, hopefully I can stay in business. Like I go to the same lady at, the Top Cuts in St. Catharines every time because she cuts good hair and she's nice to me. She's a nice lady. She's kind. I like the way she does her business, and that's where I go to get my hair cut. And to me, it's no different selling records or playing shows.
So you don't think a Discord or a French Kiss Records could really happen today?
I don't think it could. I mean, I'm trying to think of a new label that's jumped out the way those labels did, and I can't, It seems to me like the idea of a label as a thing you can start as an imprint, as a boutique idea, and grow is next to impossible now. Because the thing you're selling is what no one's buying. Yeah. When we got on Arts and Crafts, they had a very unique approach, which was they did 360 deals, which was like they managed you, they made your merch, they sold your records, and they took a piece of all of that. They didn't take as much of a piece as a major label would, but they took a little bit of all of it. And at the time, that was totally unheard of, totally unique. Now, major labels want you to do a 360 deal, right? And still take more. So it's so unfavorable to the artist that, the relationship, like a label coming to your rescue is kind of, other than in, if you're a rapper or an R&B star or a YouTube star, you might get $1 million deal now. Right. Anybody else, forget it. Yeah. It's not even close.
Madonna owns a record label and runs one, but then she released on Live Nation, I think, last time. Yeah. Which is a production company.
Yeah.
And,
exactly, man.
And they're into merchandising. I've seen T-shirts with the Live. It's a Live Nation production, right? So it seems like they've become kind of the king of 360.
Yeah, I mean, the music industry is going the way of everything else, which is, corporatism, mega consolidation. You think you're buying Perrier, but you're actually buying Nestle. So you're like, okay, I'll buy San Pellegrino. Well, you're still buying Nestle, you know? Like all these things we think we have this illusion of choice and diversity, and it's all owned by the same people.
But it's the indies that kind of keep. I mean, it was hip hop guys and punk rock guys that kept vinyl relevant in the '90s when Epitaph was selling a bunch of CDs.
Yeah.
And then now the majors, they're bumping out 5,000 pressings to get their 200,000 of some soundtrack out.
Totally.
But indie, I mean, even with Ian MacKaye, he was putting everything together. Like, does indie still, even with the new model you're using, Indiegogo, like, does indie still have the power to save something people care about? The DIY model, is it?
I don't think it does. I'm sad to say that I don't think real... You know, what indie is now still falls under a corporate umbrella. So if you're a YouTube star, okay? I mean, that is as homemade as it gets, right? You're a kid in a bedroom with your acoustic guitar. You sit on your bed and you tape yourself and you put it up online. But what's it sitting under? It's sitting under the umbrella of a giant ad firm, you know? And so the spirit is independent and the work is independent, and I admire and respect that. But what Ian MacKaye was able to do was actually find, you know, a record manufacturer who was independent and find a t-shirt maker who was independent. Right. And all those people were actually making their stuff and then selling it at a price they thought was fair. And, you know, that was an amazing time. And I was very lucky to be a kid then because it imbued me with a sense of possibility, and it made me respect artists, because I saw people like Fugazi or The Wedding Present or The Smiths actually, you know, doing what they said they were doing, you know? And now indie is like, you know, it's like saying that, you know, you're into fair trade coffee. It's like, well, have you actually researched whether that's fair trade, or are you just accepting that it's fair trade because that's what it says on the label?
It's a psychological placebo.
It's
like,
a psychological
I did something
placebo.
good for the world today with my Starbucks cup. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's some food for thought. I think I'm a little bit more optimistic. Like, I like that Patreon's able to... I know that people have to... Like, YouTube is kind of the channel, but I found these really interesting content creators.
Yeah,
right?
Patreon is really interesting. Podcasting seems to be a very independent world still.
Right.
They haven't figured out quite how to monetize podcasting past a pretty tight independent model. Yeah. And that is kind of interesting and exciting. And I think there is some potential there in, like, you know, could bands have their own channel?
Right.
Or instead of making albums, could you create a situation where you were sending people 2 or 3 tracks a month and they were paying you on a monthly basis for those 2 or 3 tracks? I think that also has a lot of potential and is exciting, and that's the aspect of the internet that I think is cool, you know? You can create communities of support.
Right.
And you can actually be accountable to each other. Instead of this triangle model, there's just a back and forth. And that's cool, you know? That's an exciting idea.
Wonderful. Well, thanks a lot for your time.
Dude, it's a pleasure. It's so nice to talk to you.
Yeah,
well, thanks for the cool questions.
We'll let you make some more music.
All right.